What's up, guys and girls, ladies and gentlemen? Episode 2 here, Brown Theology. Um, I'm just gonna speak from what is on my mind and on my heart. I guess if you could say that is, man. I over the past maybe 3 years, 4 years, been really feeling stretched by evangelicalism in general. More than stretched, maybe even more let down, disappointed by evangelicalism. Now, I know the hermanos at church are going to be like, Josué, no tienes que mirar a la gente, mira a Cristo solamente, only look at Christ, don't worry about anyone else. And to be honest, that's not working for me anymore. Eso ya no trabaja, yo nomás enfocarte en Dios, en Jesús, en Cristo. It's not what we were called to do. Now, that sounds really counter to what I was exposed to, and probably still sounds really counter to what they teach us in most evangelical churches, which is your personal relationship with Jesus Christ. And I think that's incomplete. Está incompleto. Right around the Protestant Reformation, La Reforma, in 1500s, with Martin Luther and the other guys, Zwingli and all those dudes. And they start really to solidify their theological response to a theology of works and deeds where people are getting exploited in order to make it into this concept of heaven, right? Or to be released from purgatory, etc. A lot of taking advantage of people. So now all of a sudden you have the 1500s, late 1400s, you have the Gutenberg Press, and you're able to finally read a version of the Bible in your own hands. Before that, having a Bible was basically limited for the wealthy, the uber wealthy. It's really hard to get your hands on the scriptures. So the advent of the printing press actually made it really easy for everyday people to get their hands on the Bible. So what happens is, in the 1500s, they start doing this. The Reformation starts kind of creating the manifesto of like what they believe in, their core differences, and why they're different, what they believe in, and they come up with the five solas. I don't remember them off the top of my head. I should, because I went to seminary, but the ones I want to focus on are sola fide, saved by faith alone, and sola scriptura, the word alone. So this begins kind of this polarity between the mind, the science, and our heart and the soul. We split the two and say, hey, sola scriptura is all that matters. We're only going to read the scriptures. This is our authority. This is our authoritative source. And in a way, think about other sources of influence, other sources of information, other sources of authority will be actually discredited or taken as less important as the Bible or their scriptures. Fast forward to today, it's still going on. We're still largely fundamentalists. Are still largely in denial of science, and largely will discredit scientific findings, historical information, anthropology, all of the things that point us, for example, to an old Earth. We have scientific data for that. Data that points us toward uh, birth birth issues that cause and generate certain behaviors in people. We will also discredit psychology as a source of a wealth of knowledge for things having to do with the subconscious and the conscious mind and how we operate in trauma. And we will often think about these things as just as being like, ay, son demonios, or Satanás está trabajando en esa persona. Like, it's very dismissive. It reduces people to some sort of spiritual, everything is a spiritual problem for the fundamentalist groups, of which I grew up in, of which my family still, in large part, still supports. So, I mean, these are things that we deal with as we grow, and either you come to a point where you, as a person, for example, as a person with an education, that one's the hard pill to swallow. I can understand how people with low levels of education might be able to abide by fundamentalist views and stick to fundamentalism, right? Gente sin educación puede estar en una iglesia fundamentalista, se dice, muy fácil, pero es difícil entender cuando alguien con educación, with a little more formal education, sigue aceptando las ideas fundamentalistas. It's difficult for me to wrap my head around. Pero difficult, yes and no. So what I'm seeing is que la gente estudiada que sigue en las iglesias fundamentales, you create kind of this, you split yourself, your character, into two. And I was listening to this on a podcast earlier from the Deconstructionists, which I recommend for you guys to check it out. They were talking about how intelligent people will kind of create this alternate character and kind of be in this spiritualized world where the rules of the earth, of the world, the physics of the world don't have an influence on it. It's really strange, and not, because I feel like I was there not too long ago. So I'll tell you about my experiences, and I'll tell you about what it's like to be someone with a little more education in an old school fundy church. So my background is in business administration. I focused on computer information systems, computer languages, building systems, really logical left brain stuff. I do have some right brain stuff from the past that I did a lot of, like, music things. I did a lot of creative design work. But the last couple of years I've been really left-brained, and it's really hard to be a thinking person within those organizations, within an organization that discredits science, that discredits thinking for yourself, that doesn't invite its members to question things. It doesn't invite them to create spaces where they can ask questions, entertain doubts. That's really hard for me, because the questioning and the doubts are kind of that's the basis of wisdom. That is the basis of thinking, of creating, of existing even. Like, how do you know that you're alive? Well, you begin to question things around you, you know. You begin to question your own existence. So without these spaces, it's almost like playing a character just to fit in. You know, it's almost like playing a character and suspending your belief just to fit in. Suspending your belief just to suspend and fit in, because you don't want to rock the boat. Even though you know it's whacked, you don't want to rock the boat. And when when you're in a communal society, like I have been brought up in, it's really hard to speak against it because the people will let you know that they're unhappy with you. Even if they're all thinking the same thing, it is better to adhere to the order of the group than to rock the boat. It's better to have order than to have justice. It's better to have order than to have a fair treatment of others. It's better to have order than to welcome strangers. It's better to have order than to love your neighbor as yourself. Loving your neighbor as yourself is going to get you into trouble in these communities. Otherwise, there would be a lot more people in these communities, but the reality is that these communities don't operate from a perspective of love. It's very easy to be afraid. I think many of us were afraid. Many of us were afraid of being wrong, so we had to have answers for everything. You know, I even remember one time we had a class on a Sunday school where they taught us that the moon has its own light coming out of it, that it is not reflecting the sun's light as science tells us, but that it has its own light. It is its own light source. Crazy stuff. So when you're a thinking person, and you don't have to be a rocket scientist. When you're a thinking person, it's easy to see where things break down quickly, where the theology starts breaking apart very quickly, and it creates exclusions. So up on episode 3, I'm going to talk about the exclusions of others and maybe what we can do to, when we're in these organizations, to create more inclusive spaces and hopefully move things forward to a place where everyone feels welcome.